Jakarta's humid morning air clung to everything, from the marble floors of the corporate high-rises to the creases in Arya Setiawan's freshly pressed shirt. He stepped out of the taxi, slung his worn-out laptop bag over one shoulder, and looked up at the glass facade of the Pertamina head office. His heart thumped not with nerves, but with anticipation. Today marked the beginning of his placement at the Foreign Energy Integration Division, a department that managed high-level joint ventures with oil and gas companies from around the world. Arya wasn't anyone's cousin, son-in-law, or fraternity brother. His rise had come from late nights, unpaid internships, and a reputation for being maddeningly honest. In an environment where favors flowed like oil barrels, Arya insisted on being known for one thing only: hard work. Inside, the conference room buzzed with quiet murmurs as the morning briefing began. Most attendees were foreign engineers and analysts, tall, confident, sharp-suited men and women with sleek laptops and sleek accents. Arya took his seat in the corner, opened a notebook, and started jotting notes. He barely made eye contact, until the projector blinked and a new presenter stepped forward. She wore a tailored gray suit, her blonde hair tied neatly back, and she carried herself with the effortless authority of someone who'd done this 100 times. She turned to the whiteboard, drew the layout of a new gas distribution network, and introduced herself without looking up. Leah. Tel Aviv. Systems engineer. Arya's pen stopped moving. Her tone was cool and precise, her explanation clear. But her eyes, sharp, calculating, gave away a different layer. Arya wasn't sure if it was confidence or coldness. Whatever it was, it unnerved him and intrigued him. He found himself scribbling harder in his notebook, though nothing she said was beyond his understanding. He just wanted to look busy. When the presentation ended, and the group stood to disperse, Leah walked right past him, stopped, and pointed to his notebook. "Nice notes," she said, smirking slightly. Arya opened his mouth to respond but only managed a weak smile. She was gone before he could think of anything clever to say. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork and onboarding procedures. Arya kept his head down. Still, every time he spotted Leah in the corridor or by the vending machine, he felt something shift in the air. She wasn't friendly, not in the usual way. Just present. A glance. A nod. A soft hello at the water dispenser. Once, they ended up sharing a lunch table in the cafeteria. "You're the first Indonesian who's not afraid to talk to me," Leah said between sips of bitter office coffee. "Maybe because I don't know why I should be afraid," Arya replied, without flinching. She smiled. Good answer. That night Arya opened his old leather-bound diary and wrote a single sentence. "There's something about her I don't understand, and that's why I want to understand her more." 5 days in, they were assigned to work together, prepping data for a joint technical briefing. Their workroom was small, the kind with flickering lights and one working fan. The kind of space where conversations sneak in through long silences. They worked side by side from morning till midnight. At first, it was all business. Numbers. Pipelines. Deadlines. But gradually, between loading spreadsheets and compiling diagrams, small talk crept in. "I've worked in 10 countries," Leah said casually, opening a map on her laptop. "But Indonesia's different." "Different how?" "People here are too nice." "Too nice?" "Sometimes, kindness can be disarming." Arya chuckled. "Are you saying we're easy to fool?" Leah smirked but said nothing. She looked at him like she wanted to say yes, but couldn't. By the time their first week ended, Arya found himself waiting to bump into her. He tried not to show it. But his eyes followed her even when she wasn't looking. When the office lights went out during a rainstorm and only emergency LEDs glowed, they found themselves sitting in the hallway together, waiting for power to return. "Aren't you afraid of the dark?" she asked. "No," Arya said, staring at the red exit sign in the distance. "But I'm afraid of losing my way." Leah turned to him, slowly. Losing your way is more dangerous than the dark. He didn't know then, but she wasn't just making conversation. That night, back in her hotel room, Leah sat on the balcony with a tablet in her lap. Her fingers hovered over the screen as she accessed a secured application. Inside were multiple encrypted folders, but she only opened one. Target name, Arya Sediawan. Status, emotionally engaged. Her report was short. Subject is disciplined, honest, and shows no access to sensitive internal files. Emotional proximity working partially. Further observation needed. But when she closed the file, something didn't feel right. For the first time in her professional career, Leah felt uncomfortable about a mission. And she hated it. The next morning, Arya came early. The office was still dark, chairs still tucked in. But he was there, laptop open, notes scattered, coffee half drunk. He told himself it was just good discipline. But deep down, he knew. He wanted to see her. Just her. And when she walked in, holding 2 cups of cheap machine-made coffee, and wordlessly handed him one, he smiled like a schoolboy. You didn't eat breakfast, she said. Arya took the cup. Thanks. Didn't know spies could be so thoughtful. Leah stiffened. What did you say? Arya laughed. I meant engineers. But she didn't laugh back. In that instant, something passed between them. Something fragile. Something dangerous. And yet they both ignored it, pretending it was just the coffee talking. The week that followed was a quiet whirlwind. Quiet, because Arya barely said anything to anyone anymore, except Leah. And a whirlwind, because his feelings were spinning faster than his logic could keep up. He kept reminding himself, she's a colleague. That's it. But it wasn't just that. Not anymore. Arya and Leah were assigned to survey a local gas distribution facility on the outskirts of Jakarta. It was a field assignment, just the 2 of them, riding together in a government-issued sedan. The trip took almost 2 hours through Jakarta's endless traffic. Leah asked about food, local customs, the language, and Arya answered every question with his usual calm. But inside, he was on fire. She laughed when he described how Indonesians would say, Sudah makan? Have you eaten? Instead of hello. She raised an eyebrow when he explained the obsession with sambal. And when they finally stopped at a roadside stall after their survey, Leah insisted on trying smashed fried chicken. Ayam geprek. Spicy is good. She grinned. Arya warned her. Just 1 spoon of chili, okay? She added 5. 2 bites later, her face turned red, her lips trembled, and she nearly cried. Why do you do this to yourselves? Arya laughed, genuinely. Because the pain reminds us we're alive. Leah looked at him, eyes glistening. You're weird. You too. That moment, the simplicity of that laughter under a makeshift tarp roof, the honesty in their eyes, it cracked something open. A soft place neither of them wanted to admit existed. That night Arya couldn't sleep. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the fan spinning on the ceiling, replaying her laugh again and again. The way she said he was weird. The way she winced at the chili. The way her eyes softened when they met his. And somewhere in the distance, a little voice whispered, she's not just passing through. But that voice was naive. Because across the city, in a sleek hotel suite, Leah sat hunched over her digital tablet again. But this time, she hesitated before opening the report. The system login blinked. She typed slowly. Subject, Arya Sediawan. Progress, still no access to target files. Emotional link strengthened. Subject appears cooperative in all interpersonal interactions. Further trust building required. But when she was about to hit send, she stopped. She looked at Arya's photo on her tablet, the one she secretly took while he was laughing by the coffee stall. She zoomed in. His smile wasn't fake. And that's what made it hurt. The next day, Leah invited Arya to dinner. Not in the cafeteria. Not for work. But to a rooftop restaurant in a 5-star hotel overlooking the Jakarta skyline. The invitation was casual, almost careless. But Arya knew better. She was reaching out. He wore his best shirt, the only ironed one he had left, and arrived 10 minutes early. When Leah stepped onto the rooftop, she wore a white blouse, soft curls falling over her shoulder, and no makeup. Just her. Arya couldn't look away. During dinner, she told him stories about her childhood in Tel Aviv, her time in school, her love for languages. Most of it wasn't true. Carefully curated pieces of fiction crafted by intelligence officers over the years. But she delivered them so gently that even she began to believe them. And Arya? He listened like it was gospel. Halfway through dessert, she asked, "Do you believe love can grow in a short time?" Arya paused. "I don't know. But if someone makes us want to wake up earlier every day, maybe that's a sign." Leah looked at him, startled. "Sign of what?" "That it's not just admiration. That it's something more." She smiled. But her heart clenched. That night Arya walked her to the hotel lobby, his heart beating like it did when he was 17. They stood silently by the elevator. "I had a good time," she said. He nodded. "Me too." They didn't hug. Didn't kiss. Just stood there. Suspended in a moment that felt like it should have ended differently, but didn't. And when Arya returned to his small boarding house, he realized something terrifying. He was falling for her. Not as a coworker. Not as a foreign visitor. But as someone he genuinely, irrevocably wanted in his life. And he had no idea who she really was. Meanwhile, inside the intelligence servers buried under layers of encryption, these logs were being watched. Her supervisor in Tel Aviv had grown impatient. No access, no data, no movement. And worst of all, a growing suspicion. "Are you getting too involved?" he asked on a secure call. Leah didn't answer. Because she didn't know anymore. She wasn't pretending to smile around Arya. She wasn't faking her nervousness. And she wasn't sure if she could walk away without breaking something inside her. The next morning, Arya found a message on his phone. "Can we talk? Just you and me. No work." They met in the office's back garden, a quiet spot where the sound of cars was distant, and birdsong reigned. "I want to be honest about something," she said, sitting beside him on the stone bench. Arya looked at her carefully. "Okay. I don't usually get close to people. But with you, I feel safe. And that scares me." Arya nodded slowly. "I feel the same. But I'm not afraid." "Why?" "Because I'm not playing." Leah bit her lip. There was a long pause. "You don't know who I am," she whispered. Arya didn't flinch. "I don't. But I trust what I've seen." And then he said something that hit her like a bullet. "You're trying to protect something. But maybe you're the one who needs protecting." Leah looked away, blinking fast. She stood up. "I need to go." "I won't stop you," Arya said. "But if one day you want to talk, I'll listen." She walked away, her steps heavy. Behind her, Arya sat still, hands clenched. Because deep down, he already knew. She wasn't who she claimed to be. And still, he cared. 2 days passed with no sign of Leah. No messages. No hallway hellos. Not even a passing glance in the break room. Arya tried to convince himself it was nothing. That she was just busy. That maybe she was working on a different project. But the silence weighed heavily, like a storm waiting at the edge of the sky. Then, on Saturday morning, Arya got a call from the Pertamina security office. A casual check. "Your visitor ID, the one you registered 2 weeks ago from Ms. Leah, was used today. She came in early. Said she had a meeting." Arya frowned. "No meeting was scheduled." She walked around the second floor. Nothing major. Just odd. Arya's heart sank. A small voice whispered again, "This isn't just friendship." It never was. He texted Leah. "You were in the office today?" Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Yes. Just dropping by. Sorry if it seemed unusual." He didn't reply. That night, Arya sat in his boarding room with the lights off. Just the sound of traffic outside, and the low hum of the fan. He thought back, her curiosity about the IT room. Her innocent questions. Her overly polished answers. And how her eyes never flinched when they met his. She was too perfect. Too deliberate. Too controlled. The next day, Leah asked to meet. They met again in the back garden of the office. The same place where so much had been left unspoken. She sat down on the bench next to him. Arya didn't smile. "You're avoiding me," she said softly. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" He looked at her for a long moment. "About who you really are." Lee's smile faded. "Arya, I won't ask questions you won't answer," he interrupted. "But just tell me this, why me?" Leah looked down, then answered quietly. "Because you're the most honest person in this entire building. And that is the most dangerous kind of person for someone like me." Arya closed his eyes. Her words didn't shock him, they confirmed what he'd feared. "So," he said, "was it all fake?" Leah hesitated. "At first, yes." A pause. Then she continued, voice trembling slightly. "But something changed. I didn't mean for it to. I didn't plan to care. But I did. I do." Arya stood up, breathing slowly. "You broke something in me, Leah. Something that won't fix just because you feel guilty. I'm not here to fix anything," she said, standing up too. "I just wanted to be honest. At least once. Too late." Her eyes pleaded with him, but Arya had already turned and walked away. That night, Leah sat on her hotel balcony staring at the dark cityscape. She opened her encrypted laptop and typed her final report. Target maintains strict security compliance. No breach possible through social engineering. Emotional vulnerability identified. Subject likely aware of operation. Mission integrity compromised. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then, instead of sending the report, she deleted the draft. She'd failed. But not because she couldn't steal the data. She failed because she'd lost herself in the process. Meanwhile, Arya submitted his resignation. No fanfare. No dramatic exit. Just a quiet letter, neatly typed, and left on his supervisor's desk. The office accepted it. No one questioned him. But some whispered. And within days he vanished from Jakarta. No goodbyes. No forwarding address. No LinkedIn update. Just gone. He traveled to Kalimantan, an isolated regional post where he could work with his hands, away from servers and secrets. There were no skyscrapers there. Just trees, water pipes, and silence. Arya began to fade, not in memory, but in spirit. He no longer wore crisp shirts. No longer trimmed his hair. He stopped shaving. Stopped calling his friends. He answered emails with one-liners, and when he wasn't working, he sat by the river behind his small rented house, staring at the water for hours. One day, a local neighbor saw him feeding a stray cat. "You talk to that cat like a person." The man chuckled. Arya replied with a soft smile. "Because it's the only one who listens without lying." He didn't mean to sound bitter. But the truth tasted like rust. Back in Tel Aviv, Leah sat across from her superior, dressed in formal black and holding a blank file. "No actionable intelligence?" he asked. "Nothing," she replied. "No system breach?" "Not even close." He frowned. "You were there a month." She nodded. "It wasn't the system that was too strong. It was the person. He didn't press further. Just waved her away. She walked out of the room, holding her breath. But even after being dismissed, she didn't feel free. Her punishment wasn't demotion or reprimand. Her punishment was regret. 3 months later, Arya still lived in the same tenement near the river. Still worked odd jobs. Still stared into the distance like he was waiting for a sign that would never come. Until one afternoon, a stranger showed up. A young boy from the village ran to him with a letter. Someone sent this from Jakarta. Said it's important. Arya opened the envelope with a shaky hand. It was from Perdamina HQ. A formal invitation to a reunion for veteran staff. A polite gesture, perhaps. A PR stunt. But Arya didn't throw it away. He folded it, placed it under his pillow, and didn't say a word. That same week, Leah boarded a flight to Indonesia. Not as an agent. Not as a spy. Just as a person. She declined her next field assignment. Told her supervisor she needed time. Truth was, she needed closure. When she arrived in Kalimantan, she asked around. No one had heard of an Arya Setiawan. But a quiet old woman in the market pointed her to a man who feeds stray cats and never talks much. She followed the directions. And found him, thin, hunched, older-looking, sitting under a guava tree, watching the water flow. He didn't turn when she approached. But when she said, I was just passing through, he slowly looked up. It took him a few seconds. Then he whispered, Leah. They didn't hug. Didn't smile. She sat on the ground beside him. Not too close. Just enough to feel the same wind. I didn't come to apologize, she said quietly. I know it won't mean anything. He didn't answer. She pulled a letter from her pocket and placed it between them. That's all I have. If you want to read it, read it. If not, let the wind take it. Arya looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. What did you get from me? He asked finally. Lee's voice cracked. Nothing. Exactly, Arya said. And somehow, that answer made everything heavier. She left 2 hours later. No goodbye kiss. No second chances. Just silence and footsteps. And Arya, once again, watched the river, but this time, a tear rolled down his cheek. Not from anger, but from the cruel simplicity of a truth he had finally accepted. Even the most honest love can be built on a lie. The days after Lee's departure passed like dried leaves falling from a tree, slow, silent, and without ceremony. Arya didn't open her letter. He didn't burn it either. He simply slid it beneath a rock near the roots of the guava tree where they had sat, letting nature decide its worth. He wasn't trying to be dramatic. He was just tired, of meanings, of emotions, of expectations. The man who once arrived in Jakarta with ambition and purpose was now a shadow of himself, lost in a place where memories outnumbered hopes. His neighbors still saw him sweeping the yard, watering plants, helping elderly villagers fix broken roofs. But no one knew that at night, Arya would sit alone, staring into the darkness with no expression, as if he were watching something no one else could see. Sometimes, the wind would whisper, and he'd think of her voice. Other times, a bird would land near him, and he'd remember her laugh during that fiery lunch of ayam geprek. Memories don't knock before returning. And Arya had no defenses left. Back in Jerusalem, Leah stared at her computer screen, the mission files long archived, the folders closed. Her new assignment was entirely different, desk-bound, safe, sterile. No aliases. No field lies. No charm as weapon. Just intelligence briefings, data analysis, and strategy reports. It should have been easier. But it wasn't. Because inside the top drawer of her apartment desk sat a photo she could never bring herself to delete. A blurry, candid shot of Arya sipping coffee by the roadside. His face was half smiling, half watching the world with those thoughtful eyes. She didn't know why she kept it. But every time she tried to press delete, her finger paused, paralyzed by guilt and something even worse, longing. One rainy afternoon in Kalimantan, Arya collapsed in front of a neighbor's door. His body had been growing weaker for weeks, coughing fits, dizziness, sleepless nights. But he never told anyone. Why would he? Who would care? He was taken to a small government clinic, where doctors diagnosed him with malnutrition, chronic stress, and early signs of depression. He refused to stay, even after being advised to rest. Back in his rented room, now darker and damper than ever, Arya stared at the ceiling, watching raindrops crawl through a crack. He wasn't suicidal. He wasn't angry. He just didn't feel real anymore. Leah, meanwhile, continued her work, going through reports like a ghost in a machine. Her colleagues admired her precision, her calm, her discipline. No one saw the fatigue behind her eyes. One evening, while training new recruits, a senior agent approached her. "You failed once," he said, not unkindly. "Not because you didn't get the data, but because you cared." Leah didn't deny it. "And I still do." The man studied her. "Then write it down. Not for them. For you." That night she sat at her desk, opened a blank document, and typed. "Arya, if you're reading this, and I know the chances are small, I want you to know that I came to destroy you, but ended up being destroyed. You gave without asking. You believed without proof. And I gave you everything fake, except my feelings. I'm sorry I never dared to love you honestly." She didn't print it. She didn't send it. But she folded it, placed it in the same jacket pocket she had worn the day she saw him last, as if, somehow, someday, she might return. In Kalimantan, the regional Pertamina office received a transfer request from Arya, but not for another promotion. For exit. He wrote simply, "I am no longer able to perform my duties with the same energy or focus. I respectfully resign." The resignation was accepted without protest. No questions. No fanfare. Just a polite, "Thank you for your service" email. Arya left quietly, disappearing into a remote village deep in East Kalimantan. There, signal was weak, electricity unstable, and no one asked about the past. He built wells, helped repair bamboo homes, and taught children how to read. They called him Mr. Arya, and that was enough. He never spoke of Jakarta. Never spoke of the woman. But each night, when everyone else was asleep, he'd sit on a woven mat, look up at the stars, and whisper one name in his prayer. Leah. Years passed. Leah, now stationed at the Israeli embassy in Europe, rarely returned to the field. Her life was structured: diplomatic meetings, policy briefings, international conferences. She had the life she had trained for. But not the peace she once imagined would come with it. Every now and then, when the noise around her stopped, she'd pull open the drawer, take out Arya's photo, and stare at it like it was the last piece of a truth she couldn't get back. She never married. Never fell in love again. Because everything after Arya felt rehearsed. Measured. Engineered. And what she had felt for him, even if it began with lies, had turned into the most real thing in her entire life. One morning at Pertamina's Jakarta office, a young employee received a letter from a remote village requesting agricultural tools. It was signed, Field Coordinator, Arya Setiawan. The name stunned him. He searched the system. No recent record. Just archived data. Arya had vanished from the map. But he was still alive. Still working. Still giving. They didn't reply to the letter. Not yet. But someone forwarded a copy to an old analyst at the Israeli embassy in Berlin. When Leah saw the scanned signature, she didn't cry. She just folded the paper slowly and placed it in her folder beside her untouched resignation letter. And whispered to herself, "He's alive!" The sun blazed softly over the quiet village in East Kalimantan, casting long shadows across the muddy footpaths and the cracked walls of wooden houses. Children laughed in the distance, splashing water in a narrow stream, while Arya Setiawan slowly swept dry leaves from the front of the local learning hut. His shoulders slouched a little more than before. His back curved ever so slightly. But his hands moved with quiet steadiness, the same hands that once drafted energy policy reports, the same hands that once handed coffee to a woman he'd never forget. That morning felt no different than any other. Until a motorbike arrived from town. A teenage boy got off and handed Arya a sealed envelope. "Someone from Jakarta sent this," the boy said, smiling curiously. "Said it's for you?" Arya took the envelope wordlessly, fingers lingering on the edges. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar. Neat. Careful. Formal. Inside, there was a printed letter. It was from Perdamina HQ. An invitation, a reunion of past staff members who had served the company with distinction. A recognition event for their contributions. A gentle nod from a world Arya no longer belonged to. He folded the letter and placed it under his mattress. He didn't plan to attend. He didn't plan to reply. But he didn't throw it away either. Because somewhere beneath the layers of his pain, a part of him still needed to be remembered. Thousands of miles away, in Berlin, Leah Dehan stared at her screen. She hadn't touched her official intelligence dashboard in months. Her career had shifted. She was now a diplomatic liaison, still part of the system, but far from the field. Far from chaos. Far from Arya. And yet, when she received a forwarded internal memo about a name spotted in Kalimantan, her hands began to shake. Arya Setiawan. She didn't hesitate. She packed one bag, applied for diplomatic leave, and booked a flight to Jakarta. She didn't tell anyone, not even her supervisor. This trip wasn't sanctioned. It wasn't part of her role. It was personal. She landed under a cloudy sky, carrying only essentials, and one folded letter she had written years ago but never dared to send. 2 days later, Leah stepped onto a muddy road in a village so quiet that even the trees seemed to whisper. A kind woman at the local warung pointed her toward the edge of the riverbank, where a thin man was fixing bamboo fencing. Leah walked slowly. When Arya finally turned and saw her, he didn't move. He just blinked. "Leah," he said, the name barely escaping his lips like a forgotten hymn. She nodded. "I was just passing through." He didn't respond. His eyes studied her face, as if trying to figure out whether she was real or a memory his loneliness had invented. "I didn't come to apologize," she said after a long silence. "I know it's too late." Arya looked away, his expression unreadable. "Then why did you come?" Leah took a deep breath, pulled the old envelope from her pocket, and placed it gently on a wooden bench nearby. "Just this," she said. "If you want to read it, read it. If not, let the wind take it." Arya didn't touch the letter. Instead, he asked quietly, "What did you ever really get from me?" Lee's eyes shimmered. "Nothing," she whispered. "And that's what destroyed me." They sat together under the guava tree for nearly 2 hours. Not saying much. Not looking at each other too long. Just breathing the same air, in the same silence, one last time. As the sun began to dip, Leah stood up. "I should go," she said. Arya still didn't look at her. "I don't know what my life will be after this." She nodded. "I don't either. But at least now, I know where you are." Then, without a hug, without a goodbye kiss, she walked away, disappearing down the path like she had all those years ago. Arya sat still for a long time. Finally, he picked up the letter. He didn't open it. He didn't burn it. He slid it under the same rock where he'd hidden her first letter. And whispered, "Let time decide." Months passed. Leah returned to Europe. To her desk. Her daily files. Her smart suits. Her quiet sadness. No one knew where she'd been. No one asked? But inside her drawer, she still kept a printed copy of the letter she left in Arya's village, the letter she had written in trembling hands years ago. Sometimes she'd reread it, word for word. You were never a target. You were the lesson I wasn't ready for. And every time she read it, she cried. Not because she wanted him back, but because she knew he'd never come back, to the world, to love, or to her. Meanwhile, Arya kept living in silence. He planted vegetables, cleaned irrigation channels, taught children basic math. The villagers adored him. He smiled at them. But his heart remained hollow, a quiet, constant ache. He never married. Never tried to explain. But every night, before sleeping, he'd whisper her name in prayer. Leah. Not with anger. Not with longing. Just as a man who had once given everything, and now only remembered. Years later, when Arya passed away peacefully in his sleep, the village buried him beneath the guava tree. There was no family. No headlines. No ceremony. Just a group of children who cried, and a folded letter found beneath a nearby rock, untouched, unread, aged by time and rain. The ink had faded. But the pain remained preserved. Some say Leah never recovered from what happened. That she left her job, moved to a quiet coastal town in Portugal, and lived alone by the sea. That she stopped checking the news. That she never looked up Kalimantan again. But that in her final years, every sunset she'd sit with a glass of tea and whisper to the waves. I loved you, too late. In the vast, endless silence of space, where stars shimmer like scattered diamonds and the earth looks like a distant dream, a woman sat alone in a damaged spacecraft, floating between life and death. Her name was Lena Armstrong, an accomplished astronaut from the United States, chosen for a mission that was meant to mark the pinnacle of her career. But destiny had other plans. Lena had trained for years. She was brilliant, fearless, and precise, a scientist of the highest order. Along with 4 other astronauts, her mission was to gather data from a newly launched satellite orbiting beyond the Earth's atmosphere. Everything had gone according to plan. Until it didn't. It happened suddenly, an unexpected technical failure. At first, it was just a flicker in the system. Then the lights dimmed, alarms blared, and the control panel went haywire. Panic set in. The ship began spinning out of control. One by one, systems began to fail. Her crewmates scrambled to regain control, but within minutes, tragedy struck. Lena survived. The others didn't. Floating alone in a crippled spacecraft, Lena faced the cold silence of space, haunted by the images of her fallen comrades. The oxygen was limited. The communication systems were down. Food and water supplies would barely last a month. Hope, it seemed, had abandoned her. But in that desolate darkness, something unimaginable happened. One night, if you could call it night in a place where time doesn't exist, Lena sat strapped into her seat, heart pounding, eyes swollen from crying. She tried to close her eyes and calm the anxiety that had taken hold of her soul. And then, it came. A sound. Soft at first. Soothing. Unlike anything she had heard before. There were no alarms. No mechanical humming. Just a gentle voice. Melodic. Mysterious. Echoing in the silence of space. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. The words didn't make sense to her, but the feeling they brought did. Lena opened her eyes and looked around, unsure whether she was hallucinating or dreaming. There were no radios active, no systems running. Yet the voice grew clearer. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence. Calm, comforting, powerful. A strange peace settled in her chest. The fear that had gripped her began to fade. She clutched her seatbelt and listened. Over and over again, the words repeated. They didn't feel foreign, they felt familiar, like a forgotten memory returning. Days passed. Time blurred. But the voice remained. Floating through space, Lena began to wonder, was this a final comfort before the end? A trick of her mind? Or was someone, something, trying to reach her? Weeks later, a miracle happened. A rescue signal reached her ship. After scanning tirelessly, NASA's ground team had located her position. A retrieval vessel was dispatched immediately. Lena was brought back to Earth, physically alive, but forever changed. Yet, as her feet touched solid ground again, she felt empty. That voice, those words, still echoed in her ears. And now, without the stillness of space, the noise of the world seemed deafening. She tried to return to her old life. To the old Lena. But something had shifted deep inside her. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't focus. She couldn't forget. The voice she heard in space wasn't just a sound. It was a call. Lena needed to understand what it meant. Weeks later, Lena made an unexpected decision. She left the hustle of city life and took a flight to Indonesia. There, in the calm of Bali, far from cameras, reporters, and scientific chatter, she sought solitude. She told no one about the voice. Not yet. She just wanted peace. Bali welcomed her with warm beaches, soft breezes, and a sense of timelessness. But even here, the voice in her memory grew stronger. One morning, as she wandered through a quiet alley near her guest house, she heard it again, this time not in her mind, but from a nearby building. A sound flowing through the air, gentle, profound, and unmistakably familiar. Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Lena stopped in her tracks. It was the same voice. The same melody. The same feeling. She turned toward the sound and found herself standing in front of a small mosque. The call to prayer, Adhan, was echoing from the speakers. Her heart raced. She stepped closer, drawn by an invisible force. Just then, the mosque door opened. A man in a neat police uniform walked out, wiping his hands with a small towel. He noticed Lena standing there, mesmerized. Assalamu alaikum, he greeted, with a kind smile. Are you okay? Lena blinked. I've heard this before, she whispered. Months ago, in space. The officer looked at her, surprised but curious. You heard the Adhan in space? I didn't know what it was back then, she said, still lost in thought. But hearing it again, it feels like it's calling me. The man introduced himself as Ahmad, a local police officer and devout Muslim. Lena shared her story, the mission, the accident, the mysterious voice. Ahmad listened intently, never once interrupting. When she finished, he nodded. That voice you heard, it wasn't random. The Adhan is more than just a call to prayer. It's a reminder, for all souls. Sometimes, even those floating alone in space. That day, something awakened in Lena. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing, she wanted to learn more. And so began a new mission, not in space, but within her soul. Lena didn't know what it was exactly that drew her back to the mosque the next morning. Maybe it was the serenity of the call she had heard. Maybe it was Ahmed's gentle voice and calm demeanor. Or maybe it was the feeling that something inside her was finally waking up after years of drifting. She arrived just before sunrise, the sky still wrapped in soft shades of blue and gold. The mosque was quiet, peaceful. A place where the noise of the world seemed to pause. Ahmad greeted her with the same warm smile as before. You came back, he said softly. I couldn't stay away, she replied, almost whispering. There's something about this place, it calms me. Ahmad led her to the mosque's courtyard. They sat beneath a tree where the morning breeze rustled the leaves gently. You said you heard the Adhan in space, he began. That's not a coincidence, Lena. Sometimes, Allah speaks to us in ways we don't understand right away. I'm not even sure I believe in God, she admitted. I've always believed in science. In facts, in things I could measure. Islam doesn't ask you to abandon knowledge, Ahmad said. It asks you to see knowledge as a path to understanding the Creator. Every star, every planet, every atom, they all point to something greater. Something that science alone can't explain. Lena looked at him, surprised. You believe that science and religion can exist together? I believe they must, he answered. Allah encourages us to seek knowledge. The Qur'an speaks of the heavens and the earth, the creation of man, the cycle of life and death. Islam is not afraid of science. It embraces it. That morning, Lena listened more than she spoke. Ahmed's words touched something deep within her. It wasn't just what he said, it was the way he said it. Calm, sincere, with a certainty that made her feel safe. Over the next few weeks, Lena returned to the mosque almost daily. She and Ahmad would sit and talk for hours, not just about Islam, but about the universe, the soul, the meaning of life. She asked questions, hard ones, and he never rushed to answer. Sometimes he admitted he didn't know, but they could explore the answers together. One day she said, "You know, I used to believe that outer space was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. But there's a kind of beauty here too, in prayer, in quiet reflection. It's different, but maybe more important." Ahmad smiled. Sometimes the greatest journey is not the one across galaxies, but the one into your own heart. Lena was changing, and she knew it. There was a softness returning to her, a stillness she had never known before. But there was one thing she still struggled with, the steps she wasn't sure she was ready to take. "I think about it," she confessed one evening. "About becoming Muslim. About saying the Shahada. But I'm scared. What if I'm not ready? What if I make a mistake?" "No one is perfect," Ahmad replied. "Becoming Muslim doesn't mean you'll never stumble. It means you've chosen the path to walk on, no matter how hard it gets. The first step is not about knowing everything. It's about trusting the one who knows everything." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, the echoes of the adhan in her ears. She remembered the cold silence of space, the way the voice had comforted her when everything else had failed. And now, here on earth, that same voice was guiding her still. The next morning, Lena asked to meet the Imam of the mosque. Ahmad took her with quiet joy. The Imam, an elderly man with kind eyes and a deep, peaceful presence, welcomed her warmly. They spoke for a long time. Lena shared everything, her journey in space, the voice, her confusion, her hope. The Imam listened patiently, then said, "The voice you heard was not an accident. Allah calls each of us in different ways. For some it's through joy. For others through sorrow. For you, perhaps, it was the silence of space. But you heard it, and you responded. That is a gift." He explained the meaning of the Shahada, the testimony of faith. "When you say these words," he said gently, "you are not just declaring something with your tongue. You are opening your heart to the truth that has been waiting for you." Lena's eyes welled with tears. I think I'm ready." That afternoon, as the sun poured golden light into the mosque, Lena stood before the Imam and Ahmad, her heart pounding, her hands trembling. The adhan played softly in the background, almost as if the universe itself had paused to listen. Lena took a deep breath. "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger." Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't stop. "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger." The moment those words left her lips, something inside her shifted. A weight lifted. A door opened. Peace, like she had never known, flowed through her entire being. She wasn't just Lena Armstrong the astronaut anymore. She was Lena, the believer. The seeker. The one who had returned home, without ever leaving the earth. Ahmed's eyes were filled with tears. The Imam smiled and raised his hands in prayer. And Lena stood there, a sense of clarity and purpose filling her for the first time in her life. Later that evening, she sat on the beach alone, watching the sky darken and the stars emerge one by one. She used to look at them through a visor, trapped in a machine. Now she saw them with her heart. She whispered, "Thank you for finding me." And for the first time since her return from space, the silence no longer frightened her. It felt like peace. Lena's life began to shift in quiet but profound ways. After embracing Islam, her days took on a new rhythm, anchored by prayer, study, and conversations that stirred her soul. She spent more time at the mosque, listening, learning, asking. Each word from the Qur'an felt like it was speaking directly to her. Each prayer, a moment of stillness she had never known in the noisy rush of her old world. But it wasn't just spiritual peace that bloomed, it was something deeper, more human. Ahmad was always there. Patient, sincere, never rushing her journey. They talked often, about everything, the sky, the sea, science, faith, their pasts, and their dreams. And in those conversations, something unspoken began to grow. A quiet companionship. A gentle admiration. A bond neither of them had expected. One evening, after a long walk along the beach, Lena looked at him and smiled. "You know, I never imagined I'd find this kind of peace, or someone like you." Ahmad chuckled, but his eyes held something more. "I think some journeys are written long before we take the first step." Their connection deepened naturally, like two stars slowly drawn into each other's orbit. They were different in many ways, different cultures, different languages, different pasts. But their hearts moved in sync. And somewhere along the way, the bond between them turned into love. One afternoon, as they sat under a tree in the courtyard of the mosque, Ahmad spoke gently. "Lena, I've come to care for you. More than I ever expected to. But I don't want to rush you. I just want to say it openly." She looked at him, the Bali sunlight catching her eyes. "I feel the same, Ahmad." There was silence, soft and warm. Eventually, Lena whispered, "If this is where Allah is guiding us, then I'm ready to walk this path." A few months later, in a small, peaceful ceremony held in the same mosque where Lena had taken her shahida, the two of them were married. There were no crowds, no lavish decorations, just a few close friends, the imam, and the overwhelming sense that something pure and blessed was beginning. Lena wore a simple white hijab, her face radiant with calm and joy. Ahmad, dressed in a traditional outfit, couldn't take his eyes off her. As they exchanged vows, the imam offered a quiet prayer, asking Allah to bless their union and guide their steps. After the ceremony, as they sat on a woven mat under the stars, Ahmad turned to her and said, This is more than I ever dreamed of." Lena smiled. "I used to think I belonged to the stars. But now I know, I belong here." Their marriage was built not just on love, but on shared purpose. Together, they wanted to do something meaningful. Lena had given up her space career. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to walk a different path now. One that would bring her closer to people, to faith, and to the peace she had been searching for all her life. But the world didn't make it easy. Not long after the wedding, Lena received a message from NASA. It was formal, cold, and filled with veiled concerns. "We've been monitoring recent developments in your personal life," the message read. "While we respect your privacy, your decision to convert to Islam and adopt certain religious practices has raised questions among leadership. We'd like to discuss your future with the agency." The words hit her like a punch to the chest. She had been expecting this, in some way. But it still hurt. A video call was arranged with several senior officials. They congratulated her on her recovery and then got to the point. "Lena," said one of the directors, "we appreciate everything you've contributed to the program. But your recent decisions, especially wearing the hijab and speaking publicly about your beliefs, might not align with the image NASA wants to maintain." She stared at the screen, stunned. Are you saying I can't believe in God and be a scientist? That's not what we're saying, the man replied unconvincingly. We're saying, be careful. Faith is personal. But your position here is public. And complicated. Lena didn't argue. She didn't shout. She simply thanked them for their time and ended the call. She sat in silence for a long while after. Ahmad joined her, sensing her unease. They want me to choose, she said quietly. Between my faith and my career. What will you do? He asked gently. I've already chosen, she replied. That's what they don't understand. Still, the pain lingered. She had given her life to science, trained harder than most, risked everything to reach the stars. And now, it felt like the world was slowly closing its doors. But Ahmad reminded her of something important. Maybe Allah is opening a different door, one they can't see. Lena held on to those words. She began to think, what if she could build something new? A place where science and faith weren't enemies, but partners. A place where young minds could explore the universe without having to hide their beliefs. It started as a conversation. Then a plan. Then a dream. Together, Lena and Ahmad began working on a project, an educational center in Bali, where science and Islamic values could be taught side by side. A school of thought that encouraged curiosity, awe, and balance. A place where the next generation could grow with both telescopes and prayer mats. It wasn't easy. Some people didn't understand. Others criticized. But they kept going. Lena often thought back to that moment in space, when everything had gone dark, and that voice had reached her. That call had not only saved her, it had redefined her. Now, on Earth, she was answering it in her own way. And this journey was just beginning. As the months passed, Lena and Ahmad's educational center began to take shape, first as a small initiative in a rented building, and then as a growing institution that drew curious minds from across the country. People were intrigued. Could science and Islam truly walk hand in hand? Could reason and revelation coexist? Lena believed so with all her heart. She taught classes on astronomy and physics, blending her knowledge of the stars with Quranic verses that spoke of the heavens. She showed her students that the exploration of the universe was not an act of defiance against God, but a way of worship. That every planet, every particle, was a sign, a reminder of the vastness of Allah's creation. Ahmad focused on theology, spiritual development, and the beauty of Islamic ethics. Together, they crafted a curriculum unlike anything else in Indonesia, rooted in balance. Not all agreed with their approach. Some in the scientific community thought they were watering down science. Others in religious circles felt they were being too open, too modern. But Lena had faced far greater resistance than this. She had faced silence in space. She had stared death in the eye. She had walked away from the life she once thought she wanted. And through it all, she had found peace in something greater than herself. Still, one day, as she stood at the whiteboard, describing the orbits of distant exoplanets, she paused mid-sentence. A wave of doubt swept over her. Was she doing enough? Was she truly bridging the gap? Or just building another wall? That evening, she and Ahmad walked along the beach again. The same beach where they had once spoken of love, faith, and the stars. Now she spoke of pressure. Sometimes I feel like people expect me to be this perfect example, she said. Like I have to constantly prove that what we're doing makes sense. You don't owe them proof, Ahmad said gently. You've already shown the world something more important, that peace and knowledge can live together. That faith isn't the opposite of science, it's the foundation of wonder. She nodded, but her thoughts lingered. Was she still being true to her heart? Or had the mission consumed her? It was around that time she received a letter, this one not from NASA, or critics, or supporters. It was from her parents. They had watched from afar as their daughter, once the face of American space exploration, had quietly slipped into another life. A life they didn't understand, a faith they had only seen on the news. At first, they were silent. Then, skeptical. And now, finally, they wanted to talk. Lena was nervous. She and Ahmad traveled to the United States together. Her parents' home was filled with old photos of her in her astronaut uniform, awards on the wall, articles framed in the hallway. Her mother's voice was soft when they finally sat down. "You've changed," she said. "I've grown," Lena replied, calm but firm. "I've found something that gives me peace." "But you were already someone," her father said. "You were an astronaut, Lena. You had it all." "I had the world," she said quietly. "But I didn't have myself. Not until I heard that call in space. Not until I understood who I really was." There was a long silence. Then her mother said, "Are you happy?" Lena looked at Ahmad, then back at her parents. "Yes. Deeply. Even with the struggles. Especially with the struggles." They didn't respond right away. But when they hugged her goodbye at the airport, her mother whispered, "We may not understand it yet. But we can see it, it's real." Back in Bali, the institution continued to grow. They were invited to conferences, asked to consult on curriculums, and featured in global news outlets. But more importantly, they were reaching people, young and old, who had never thought it possible to love both science and faith. Still, the journey wasn't easy. They faced opposition from elite scientific institutions who warned against religious contamination. Lena received emails from colleagues who accused her of turning her back on rationality. And there were moments, even for her, when the weight of it all felt too much. But every time she heard the adhan, her heart would remember that night in space. That silence. That call. That peace. Years passed. Lena and Ahmad opened branches in Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur. They began offering scholarships to underprivileged students. They held community events, prayer circles, science fairs. The center became more than just a school, it became a sanctuary. One day, as they sat beneath a tree at the original center in Bali, watching students file out after class, Lena turned to Ahmad and said, "Do you ever think about what we've built?" Ahmad smiled. "All the time. I used to think my mission was out there," she said, pointing toward the sky. "Now I know, it was always here." He took her hand. "And it's just beginning." That night, as the stars stretched across the Bali sky, Lena stepped outside alone. She closed her eyes and listened. And in the silence, she heard it again, not with her ears, but with her soul. The same voice. The same words. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Not a memory. Not a dream. But a reminder. That peace is not a place in the universe. It is a place in the heart. And she had finally arrived.